Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and I have a piece of fabric that's 16 inches by the width of fabric, which is 45 inches. And I'm going to turn this scrap piece of fabric plus scraps from a project into a table runner. Now this table runner can be done at a domestic machine or a sit-down machine. If you're using your home machine, you're going to be able to use a walking foot or a foot for ruler work. You can even use a regular foot. On a sit-down machine, we're going to do it with a ruler work foot. And what's going to be fun with this is we are going to make that quilt top, sandwich it, quilt it, all at the same time. It's a stitch and flip technique. So on your domestic machine, you're just going to be able to follow a straight line. But since we do not have feed dogs or anything on a sit-down machine, I'm going to use ruler work, which means I'm going to need a straight edge of a ruler that's going to go along that special foot for the ruler work. The fun thing about this project is you need to start with one piece of fabric, have it attached onto your backing, and then we need strips of fabric. And for the strips of fabric, there needs to be only one edge that is perfectly straight. You can have one edge that's crooked and all out of sorts, but we only need one straight edge. That's going to keep us straight along the way. So we can have long, skinny pieces, odd-shaped pieces, even triangular pieces. And these are all going to be able to go on in this stitch and flip method. So the first thing we need to do is get whatever machine you're going to use set up with either the walking foot or our foot for ruler work. I will be ironing as I go along, so I do have a little iron onto a little card table, and I do have my strips of fabric. And I've divided my strips up into three piles: a light, medium, and a dark. And in this case, they're all the blacks and grays. And I will be using glide thread. It has a bit of a shine to it, so the quilting is going to look nice on all of this. I do have my special foot on for the ruler work, and this back fabric is already attached onto the backing, and I'm going to work from the front. There are two ways we can do this. We can start from the center and go out to the sides, or start from one side and go down. If you're working on the home machine, your bed is a little bit smaller, so you might find it easier to start from the center and work out. If you're sitting down at a machine with a large area, you can start from one side and go right to the other. But I'm going to start right in the middle and work going out on both sides. So the first thing I need to do is put down a strip of fabric. And the first one that I want to do, I do want to be able to cover from one edge to another. So I'm going to place that very first piece down. And because this is a fusible batting, I will just slide this over and just press it right onto that batting. All of my fabrics are already well pressed, but this will just save me from having to have them slip around. And then if we have a long tail, we can just cut that tail off. Once I have that first strip down, I'm going to take my second strip and I'm going to use the straight cut edge. This edge here is a little bit crooked, but I know this one is straight, and that's the one I'm going to use. I'm always going to use that straight edge. Place it down, and you can always give a peek and make sure that it's in the placement that you want on the other side. Smooth it down. If you'd like, you can pin the edge that you're not going to stitch, but I would recommend using these flat head flower pins. And that way the rulers will sit over top of them. If this is a very small project, you won't need them. So now I do have that one straight edge. And I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to stitch a straight line all the way down that edge. And it won't matter what seam allowance you use. We just need a straight line. So I'm going to be stitching a straight line right down this edge, And if you're going to use a walking foot, you can just use that straight edge that has been already cut. And just let that ruler do all of the work. Slide the ruler. Keep your line nice and straight. And keep stitching. So I have that first straight line done. Remove those pins. Flip that over. And because I did use this fusible batting, I'm going to be able to just press this down and it's going to stay for me. Once it's pressed down, I'm going to be able to add my additional pieces. You can see this edge here definitely was not the straight edge. And that's fine because the next piece, that straight edge, is going to straighten us up. We only need one straight edge, and that's always going to be on the top, and that's the seam we're going to follow. So I'm going to be able to put that next piece on. And I'm not worried about all of this little extra. It's just going to come off. I can keep those pieces very straight if I'd like, or I can really put them on some fun different angles. You can go over top of previous lines. If you're using the walking foot, you're just going to follow this top edge and stitch all the way down and flip over. I'm doing this with ruler work, so I'm going to use that straight edge of the ruler and run that foot all the way along. And I do come right off that batting just by a couple of stitches. So I do have that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I could just pull that back and just trim it off. And if it's small pieces, you can leave it. And I'm doing this right at the machine, so I'm not really concerned on how straight that is. I just want to remove the extra. Now I'm going to be able to take this to the iron and iron that down. And trim off this extra. So I'm going to continue adding pieces going down one side and then going in the opposite direction. I can even use some small pieces as long as I have one straight edge. I can put that piece anywhere I want. And I'm going to stitch right to that edge. Not only does the ruler keep me straight, I do have that one straight edge to help. Now I'll just trim off all that extra seam allowance. The next piece I'm going to add is going to be a short piece, and use that straight edge and stitch down. As we stitch these pieces on, we're going to find that there are some seams that are stitched on and we won't be able to pull that fabric back. So just fold that fabric back, put a crease with your hand, and that's where you're going to cut. It's okay if we have extra fabric here, it won't hurt. And that's just kind of going to give me a good idea where to trim that off. And I'm really not worried on how straight that is. And press. And I now have a little end. So I need to make sure I fill this. So you can use a long piece, which means this piece will be trimmed off and we can use it for another piece. We can always use shorter pieces and flip those over. And then we're going to have to fill in this piece. So we're just going to flip as we go along. I have a triangular piece. I'm going to use that. I'm going to just fold it over and make sure that my seam right here is covered. And I'm not worried about the rest. So I'm going to stitch that down. I'm eventually going to be covering this entire piece. And I'm not worried about how big the pieces or how small the pieces are. I just want to cover this entire piece. And once you get going, it really is quite quick. So I'm just going to place those pieces down, stitch, trim if I have to, flip, and continue. Let me get a couple of more done and I'll show you the one side. So here's that one side done. We started with that black in the center and then went to that one side. I have some little pieces, some long pieces, fat pieces. It doesn't matter. I just want to fill this piece. And all of this extra will be trimmed off after. Now I get to turn it around and do the second side. There's that center and the second side done. And because each piece has been stitched down, we really do not need to do any more quilting. But I will be adding just a little bit in with some of my rulers. And I'm not really going to follow any pattern. I just want to do some of these shapes. So I'm going to put the rulers down and just do some quilting. I'm not going to quilt all of them. Just every once in a while, I'm going to do some of the quilting with these rulers. That kind of gives me a chance to practice my rulers a little bit and add a little bit more dimension on the table runner. So here is all that quilting done on that table runner. And you can see there's no real pattern. I just had some fun with all of those different rulers. Now let's get this trimmed up and bound. And with that binding on, it looks really nice. I did start with that back piece, 16 inches by the width of fabric, but you could use any size that you want. And just keep layering pieces, stitch, flip, and continue until you're done from side to side. The additional quilting is not necessary, but it is a lot of fun to do. So you can do this on your home machine with a walking foot, or use your ruler foot on your home machine, or you can do it using a sit down. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. You can always join me on Facebook and Instagram on Sew Very Easy also. Bye now.